very good afternoon to all, or good morning or good evening if you're joining us from elsewhere. I'm Sandeepan, Director at the Foundation for Agrarian Studies, and on behalf of the FAS, I welcome you all to this seventh and the last seminar of the second edition of FAS Young Scholars Online Seminar Series 2023-24. Most of you would be aware that we have been running this seminar series since 2022 April, trying to provide a platform for young scholars working in the field of agrarian studies and on socioeconomic life of rural areas to present their work and to sort of try to develop a research group working on these areas. Through this means, we also try to explore possibilities for future collaboration. And I'm happy to inform you that as we approach the end of the second series, there is some bit of network building that we have been able to successfully do through this platform. This year, 7 young scholars from Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and of course India have presented their work, drawing from their doctoral research. A lot of the success of the seminar series, both the seminars, the seminar series 1 as well as 2, is due to the support of Professor Barbara Harris White, the chair of the seminar series. Her comments and feedback, not just during these seminars, but also when we are doing the background work, that has been immensely helpful in shaping the way it is going. And I'm sure all the scholars who have presented on this platform share this feeling. So thank you, Professor Barbara, once again for guiding us. And I'm sure that very soon we will start thinking about the third, how do we shape up the third bit of the seminar series. Today is the last session, and the speaker is Mrityunjay Pandey, a PhD scholar at the School of Economics, University of Hyderabad, India. He's at the final stages of his doctoral research work, and today he'll be speaking on livelihood, production organization, and accumulation, a village study from Bihar. His work is based on the data based on village surveys that we had conducted in one village in Bihar in 2012, and we revisited this village in 2018. Mrityunjay was part of that village survey, and he was instrumental in those studies. And in fact, some of those, the results from some of those studies have already been published in a special issue of the Review of Agrarian Studies, which is the volume 12, number 1. So those of you who are interested in knowing a little bit more about the data from the village surveys in Bihar, I mean, this is an issue that you must consider. Mrityunjay's doctoral work is an example of research collaboration between young scholars who are interested in studying the rural economy and FAS. Drawing from this, I again would like this opportunity to invite young scholars and students who are interested in the field of agrarian studies, who would like to work with us using the methodology of village studies that we have developed, as well as the large pool of primary data on in the Indian countryside that we have developed in all these more than 1.5 decades. The discussant for Mrityunjay's talk is Dr. Nelson Mandela, Assistant Professor, Department of Economics at GITAM University, deemed to be university. And thank you, Nelson, for accepting our invitation. Before handing these proceedings over to the chair, I would say that we have come to the end of this edition of the Young Scholars Seminar, or we are approaching the end of this seminar series. We will take a couple of months to reflect on the experiences and the learnings from this edition, and very soon plan for the next series. With these words, let me call upon Professor Barbara. Professor Barbara.
Thank you very much, yes. Sandeepan. Can everybody hear me? Is the mic working okay? Okay,
yes,
good.
You're audible.
Thank you for what you said, but it has been an enormously enriching learning experience for me to chair these 2 series. So thank you again for inviting me to do this hard work. The format for today, Dr. Sandeepan has introduced the two main speakers, but it's my job to discipline the two main speakers. So just for Mrityunjay and Nelson, Mrityunjay, you have 25, 30 minutes to set out your analysis of production relations and accumulation in your village in Bihar. And then Nelson, 5 to 10 minutes of discussants' comments. And then I may or may not add my own. And then we'll proceed to Q&A. And as I warn everybody, we generally go over the hour slightly, but if you have to leave, no hard feelings. Okay, so without more ado, may I hand over to Mrityunjay for your talk. Thanks very much.
Mrityunjay, please unmute yourself. Mrityunjay, please unmute yourself.
It's a muted speaker.
Hello. Yeah. Am I audible now?
Yes.
Yes, loud and
Yes,
clear.
you are.
Good evening, everyone from India. I'd like to thank Foundation for Agrarian Studies for giving me this platform to present my work. The title of my presentation is Livelihood, Production Organization and Accumulation, a village study from Bihar. This work is derived out of my PhD thesis that is still in work in progress, and here I'm presenting with hope to seek critical reviews and comments from chair, discussant, and other participants. Moving to the question, why Bihar? So Bihar is peculiar in many ways. First, it's a region well endowed with most fertile land in the country, which has a surplus water resources for irrigation, which makes case for a multi-cropping agrarian economy with high yield or productivity. But the reality is, it's a backward and stagnated. Bihar is peculiar in another way also, that it's continued to be rural predominantly. In 1951 census, Bihar was 93% rural. When we moved 60 years ahead, in 2011 census as well, 90% of Bihar population was residing in rural areas. Despite being such a high rural population base, Bihar's population density is the highest in Indian states, except few urbanized states like Goa and Delhi. Such a highly densely populated rural Bihar have a very skewed land distribution. 51% are landless. Among those who are owning land, marginal and small share more than 95%. And on the other hand side, just 3% of households own more than 20% of land. With such a stagnated agriculture economy and a skewed land distribution, despite all that, nearly 75% rural workforce is in agriculture. That makes Bihar habitat of most densely populated rural poor, not just in India, but in the world. And it makes an important case in political economy to analyze, study, and go ahead for. As we all know, and it's well established in academia, the Bihar's agrarian economy was doing much better than other regions in ancient and medieval time. But with the coming of zamindari system and under the British colonial rule, the Bihar plight began because creation of multiple layers of intermediaries and rent-seeking practices that has not improved even after independence, because the land question was not resolved and a semi-feudal structure got created. That created a history of backwardness for agriculture in Bihar. However, when we see the recent macro writings, particularly from the established institutions on Bihar's macro agrarian economy, all of them agree to the fact that the Bihar agriculture is in distress. However, that reasoning are differ. Like for instance, I still explain it in a way like Bihar have very high land to labor to land ratio. Due to that, the agriculture is becoming non-viable, and people are moving out, and economy is becoming remittance economy. Whereas the World Bank see a problem of poor governance poor physical infrastructure that is a constraint to agricultural growth. IGC see it as a lopsided development that has created dualism and the low level of human capital. Though these studies have established that Bihar agriculture is in distress, but they have defined distress in macroeconomic sense in the terms of productivity and a rate of growth. Second, they treat distress as a universal feature of Bihar agrarian economy. Moving to that, in this study or in this presentation, I attempt to understand the internal dynamism of Bihar's agriculture, Bihar agrarian distress. I analyze the economic responses or strategies of different socio-economic sections to understand the impact of current crisis on them. At the same time, I also analyze is the strategies of different socio-economic classes have impact in creation or sustenance of the crisis itself. This presentation briefly discusses state level statistics on Bihar agrarian and rural economy. After that, I move to a village study to understand or analyze internal class dynamism of Bihar's agrarian rural distress. This presentation has 4 sections. First, I briefly go through the macroeconomic trends of Bihar agrarian economy. After that, I'll present livelihood strategies of landless manual labor households, then production organization of cultivator households, and sources of surplus and accumulation strategy of surplus appropriating households. The last 3 sections will be based on a village study. When we analyze the macroeconomic trends of Bihar agrarian economy, 6 interesting features have come out. I won't go in detail because of limitation of time. I may come back if time prevails, or in discussion we can discuss in details. One is large-scale landlessness has continued to a problem in Bihar that has not resolved yet, and caste still play a vital role in the land distribution, as more than 70% of Dalits and tribal are still landless. That is, the landlessness among the upper caste is less than 28%. Moreover, among the Dalit households in Bihar, landlessness of homestead land itself is a big and very significant problem. Bihar historically had high tenancy. However, post 71, we see a decline of tenancy in Bihar. However, in the post-reform period, we see a rapid revival of tenancy in Bihar. In the revival phase of tenancy, the landless and the marginal landowners are the primary tenant section. When we see the rural indebtedness, we see the similar trend. From 97, rural indebtedness was declining, debt to asset ratio was declining, and share of formal credit was increasing. However, post-reform period, indebtedness is increasing, debt to asset ratio is increasing, but share of formal credit in total credit is declining. Currently, 35% of cultivators, 30% of rural households are indebted, and their share of informal loans is more than 50%. In last 40 years, we see a phenomenal increase in the use of modern input, particularly the fertilizer and purchase of high yield variety seeds, and as well as the machine use, which was almost negligible in 1980s. Now we see almost 10% increase in fertilizer use and phenomenal rise in the machine use. However, this increase in input uses has not reflected in yield. Yield growth continued to be low, and it's seeing the large level fluctuation. Along with that, no price assurity has created a system in which cultivators are constantly making negative crop incomes. Bihar historically had a phases of high seasonal and short-term migration, depending on condition of Bihar economy in comparison to other nearby regions. For instance, in 1850s, we see with the Bihar famines and other factors coming, we see a very high levels of out migration from Bihar, but that has declined in post-World War time. However, in the after the Green Revolution, when north and western part of India see a rapid growth in agriculture in comparison to Eastern India, we again see a very high rate of short-term and the circular migration from Bihar. This short-term and circular migration has increasing at unprecedented rate post reform period. The NSSO 2007-8 migration survey shows more than 30% of households in Bihar rural household have migration from their household, which is double of the all India and highest in among Indian states. IST studies of 36 villages show between 98 to 2009, the migration witnessing households have increased from 36% to 60% in rural Bihar. From here, I moved to the village study. I'm studying village named Katkuya, which was surveyed by the Foundation for Agrarian Studies in 2012, with a survey reference year was July 2011 to June 2012. PARI has surveyed more than 30 villages across different agroclimatic zones. It is very rich source of data to analyze and understand socio-economic relations in Indian countryside, as well as it's a very important data source to understand conditions of marginalized sections of our society like Dalits, tribals, and women. The Katkuya village is located in the Wagha block of West Champaran district, which lies in the North Bihar. The climatic zone is North Alluvial Gangetic Plains. The difference between the ownership holding and the operation holding can be understood with the historical fact that historically this village was held by upper caste landlords, Bhumihar and Brahmins. They were numerically low, small, but they hold large chunk of land in the village. But in 1980s, 90s, they moved out of village, but they continued to hold large chunk of land in the village. Since the survey captured only resident of the village, this household was not part of the survey. Currently, the village is multi-caste village. It has more than 28. It has 28 castes. However, it is dominated by numerically as well as in the other sense by the Yadav and the Koiris. They have 25% of the village, but own around 80% of land. On the other hand side, Dalit household are 12% of the village, but they do not own even 2 acres of land in the village. More than 90% of Dalit households are landless. Many of them didn't have a homestead land. Village has multiple crops. However, sugarcane paddy has captured more than 80% of gross crop area. In India, class and caste are intertwined, and they have both play a crucial role in defining the socioeconomic condition of the household. That's true for this village as well. However, the complexity of caste couldn't be presented much in this presentation because because I'm mainly focusing on the economic decisions, economic strategies, where caste do play a very important role, but bringing caste and class together in single presentation was slightly complicated, and I feel for the understanding caste in the economic conditioning, or independent presentation should be there. So I may refer caste throughout the presentation, but a clear analysis of caste and the economic conditioning of the village should be separately presented. I have divided the village households into two sections: farm sector household and non-farm sector. In farm sector, I have divided household into 4 groups: landless manual labor household or non-cultivator, landless manual labor household or pure tenants, means they're landless but they lease in land and cultivate. Owner cultivator can be mixed tenants, and surplus appropriating household. In this presentation, I studying the only farm household. There are 88% of the village. Any household who do not own any agricultural land in the village and primarily dependent on their manual labor or for survival were classified as LML or landless manual labor households. Means these are that set of households in the village economy who have nothing else but their manual labor power to survive in the village economy. A total of 157 households came in this category, and there are 57% of farm household. If we see caste-wise, 90% of Dalit households were LML, and the most of the extremely backward households were also part of this group. So, these households were impoverished. Their living condition was impoverished. Most of them were living in huts made up of thatch and mud, with a very low level of literacy, and even among those who are educated or have been to schooling, their average year of schooling was less than 5 years. This, when you see the livelihood of these households, they were engaged in multiple of often distinct activities like agriculture labor, non-agriculture labor, cultivation, migration, artisanal activities, caste calling activities. However, despite all that, their livelihood condition were very impoverished. They were living in a near destitution condition. I would like to present the condition of livelihood of these households through one case study. At the time of the survey in 2012, Jeet Kumar, name changed, was 25 years old and head of household of an ML household, consisting of 5 members, including his wife, 2 children, and his ailing mother. Jeet had been engaged in manual labor migration since the age of 14, when he first migrated to Srinagar, Jammu Kashmir. He first migrated as a construction laborer by age of 25. He had migrated to 6 different cities across the country, working as daily wage laborers. In the survey reference year, Jeet household also cultivated a small parcel of land which they have leased in. Jeet participated in farming operations during sowing and harvesting season and migrated for the rest of the year. In his absence, his wife would take care of the farm. Despite all hardship and drudgery, annual household income of Jeet's household was less than rupees 40,000. From that, we can understand what was the condition of livelihood of these households. As we can see from this figure, almost most of the households had 3 or 4 occupations in their livelihood. But how they were choosing which occupation to engage in from the a lot of activities they were engaging in. To analyze that, we have chosen some set of activities occupation called choice livelihood avenues, which I define as those occupations that household can plan, choose, and engage in, which do not need long spend time to engage in, and are defined as choice livelihood avenues. Manual labor, which include agriculture labor, non-agriculture labor, and long-term labor. Tenant cultivation and work migration was defined as choice livelihood avenues, and all possible combination of these choice livelihood avenues were defined as livelihood strategies of LML household. So there are 4 possible combinations could be identified: on manual labor migration, manual labor cultivation, and all 3. Despite low levels of earnings across their strategies, the choice of the different strategies do impacted their household income, particularly when the migration come into the picture. As we can see, labor plus migration significantly differ their levels of earning from only labor and labor plus cultivation. So why do some households opt for migration, other didn't? Or why, when is something that is interesting to observe. And at the same time, when cultivation was not making any difference in their earning, why households were opting for cultivation? That's another interesting question, but that needs further exploration. Is beyond the scope of this presentation. All the households are landless and their level of education also low. So what are the factors that separating or making some household opt for some particular strategies and other for the different one? From the based on literature, I have taken 2 set of variables. One is household labor endowment and other is asset and debt conditions. Based on how, when we see from the household labor endowment, as we can see, with increase in number of household working members, here working members are defined as anyone in the age group of 16 to 65 and reported being in paid economic activities as a primary or secondary status in the survey. So as the number of working member increases, the number of occupations in the livelihood strategies increases. So means the household members, number of working members can be a constraining factor for the diversification. To understand the dynamism of it, I have divided household working member into 3 groups: female working members, working member male 16 to 39 age group, working member male 40 to 65 age group. As you can see, when the male working members 16 are increasing, the possibility of migration come into the strategy, whereas when female members increases and male members decreases, the possibilities of cultivation coming into livelihood strategy increases. Whereas when number of male workers and the female workers and the members in the third group, which is working male in the age of 40 to 65, all of them are higher than households opt for and combination, which have all three. Moving it to the asset and debt condition, as we can see, households who have better asset condition relatively are going for cultivation, whereas the household have a slightly relatively lower asset holding. They are engaging either in manual labor or in migration. They are not going for cultivation. Same with the debt. Household with the highest debts are not going for cultivation, just going for migration, whereas the household with the lower debt are going for cultivation and migration. So from this we can what we can see two things. One, there exist young male workers in the village that is not looking for livelihood avenues inside village but outside. 98% of young male workers have migrated from the village. So if the aspiration of these workers are met and they get chances to get settled in the cities, what is called remittance economy can happen with Bihar. If their aspirations not get realized, this trend of surplus and short-term migration may continue. Another interesting thing to observe from this table is households with higher debt conditions are moving out, and households with the lower debt conditions are not going for migration. So though the migration make differences to their household income, but what sort of migration is it and what kind of drudgery involved in the migration, we can understand household in the extreme debt conditions are only the one who is aggressively migrating out. From here, I'll move. Yes. Okay. From here, I move to the third part of the presentation, which is production organization of cultivator households. So households that operated land between 0 to 10 acres and had a positive labor ratio are classified as a cultivator household. A total of 183 households are classified as a cultivator household. In that, tenant cultivators from the LMS group are also included. Based on operation holding size class, cultivators were divided into 4 groups: cultivator 5 to 10, 2 to 2.5 to 5, 1 to 2.5, and 0 to 1. While organizing production in agriculture, one of the most important decisions that a cultivator makes is accessing land. So there are two possibilities to access land. One is owner self-cultivation, and second is engaging in leasing market or taking land on tenancy. So if the owner and ownership holding and operation holding is same, means that self-cultivation is there, the ownership holding and operation holding should be same. If household is engaging in tenancy, it should diverse. So in this figure, we can see there is a 45-degree line that shows the line of self-owned cultivators. Any divergence above the line means household has leased in more land than the leasing out. Any divergence below it shows households have leased out more land than leasing in. Household on the x-axis are the households they have purely leased out. Since we are taking cultivator household, so hardly there will be any household here. Household on the y-axis are the pure tenants. When you see this figure, we observe two things. One, most of the cultivators are in the group of 0 to 2 or say 2.5 acres, means marginal cultivators. Second, most of the households who have leased in land are 0 to 1 acre or landless. Suppose an interesting question: are the cultivators or the landowners in the higher size groups are not interested in agriculture? Why they are not expanding their size of operation, or are they just here and looking for other avenues, and the moment they may move out of agriculture? To assess it, I have tried to analyze the recent investment behavior. Here I present last 10 years sale and purchase of land, and I present here net land purchase in last 10 years. Here we can see among the cultivator household, whatever the amount of land that is sold, almost half of it was taken by the cultivator and highest operation holding size group. When we see tractors, total 10 tractors these households own. Out of that, 8 was purchased in last 5 years. Among those 8, 4 were purchased by the cultivator in 5 to 10. 3 were purchased by cultivators in 2 to 2.5 to 5. Same is story hold for the pump sets as well. So it means that these households are interested in being in rural economy, being in the agriculture economy. Other variable that can influence household cultivation decision is the accessibility to credit. What we observe here, with increase in this operation size holding, their accessibility to formal credit increases. It is just 2% for the smallest group and the 36% for the largest group. And the interest rates in the formal sector is much lower than the informal sector. Even in formal sector, the interest rate when we observe, I presume the household have access to informal credit from the different channels in the rural economy. The smallest group access credit in informal sector, informal channels at 56%. By the time we reach to the biggest group, it reaches to 30%. It's been almost at half rate. When you see yield, the highest group has a yield advantage, prices advantage of both principal crops. They have yield advantage, they have price advantage, they have credit advantage, they're investing in land. The yield and price reflected in the GBO advantage as well. And overall, the crop income is all significantly higher than the other groups. If they have higher crop income, higher GBO, they're getting invested in agriculture, then why are they are not the one who's expanding their size of operation? That's an interesting question that, and an intriguing question that I'll carry to the next section. The next section is on the surplus appropriating households, sources of surplus, and accumulation strategies. So household with operation holding of 10 acres and more and zero labor ratio are classified as surplus appropriating households. A total of 11 households were classified in this group. This group is not formed by any forces of market as such. This group has evolved historically through three streams. One who historically owned large chunk of land in village, other who came to village in 1980s and 90s, occupied or purchased large chunk of land. They were landlords in other villages, and third who were managers of old or absentee landlords. Caste-wise, these households came from the dominant caste, Yadav, Koiri, and Bhumihar. The average land ownership of these households of 26 acres. Two of them have owned more than 100 acres. They have controlled all economic and political institutions in village. They are the household whom people in the village recognize and respect. With force, without force, people recognize them in the block offices and the block market. Auto drivers recognize their homes and give extra treatment if someone is asked them to drop to their houses. So these are the features of these households and how they are positioned in the village economy or village society. This one is very interesting assessment of this village agrarian economy. As we can see, the surplus appropriating household do not have much of the GBO advantage over the cultivator in the largest group for the both paddy and sugarcane. However, when we see the and we can see the understandable to see the lower machine cost because they own most of their machine they are using. But when we see the hired labor cost, the hired labor cost per acre is almost similar for these two groups. However, they are using almost 100% of hired labor, and the other group is using around 75% of hired labor. Means per acre, this group is having 20 to 25% advantage on hired labor. So how they are saving or how they are managing their cultivation with advantage on the hired labor of more than 20%. This is something I like to explore through understanding surplus appropriating behavior of these households. In farm sector, these households appropriate surplus from 4 channels. One is, these are the household in the village, they use long-term labor. So there are 3 forms of long-term labor prevailed in the village. One is non-attached, other is attached through land, and third is attached through debt. In non-attached, these households have hired someone from their caste or hamlet, mainly for machine operation, particularly tractor. That is non-attached in contract, and the payments are on a monthly basis. The attachment through land is in that arrangement. A parcel of land, usually 0.5 acres, were given to the labor household, and in return of that, that household has to give their labor throughout the year to these households. Third is attachment through debt. Though these households have reported them as a hired laborer, but when we go deep into it, when in the village, when the surplus appropriating households give debt to some laboring household, they do not take these money back in the form of money or cash. Instead, they push laborer household to return the money in the form of labor, and they cannot move out of village. They cannot migrate till the time money is repaid. And the payment of the consideration of wages in these contracts in 2012 prices were 30 to 50 rupees of the prevailing wage rates in the village. These households hold right to first call on all of them, and these laborers cannot work for anyone else without their permission. Second way of their surplus appropriation is use of tenancy. They have a large chunk of land that they lease out to the laborers, that I will come to the next slide as well, to hold their labor or to seek right to first call on them. Third is intra-class solidarity, which means these households share free machinery among each other. In the village, machine rental charges very high. For 1 hour use of a tractor, it comes around 300 to 400. But these households share among each other for free. They share interest or free loans among each other. More than 30% of informal loans reported among them were interest free. And when they lease land from each other or from the other section of rural rich, they get it for the very lower rent. On the fourth point, there are two public institutions prevailed in the village. One is PATS, other is sugar mill. Both engage in output sale. Only these households had access to PATS in the village, others did not have. The prices in PATS are much higher than the private merchants. In the sugar mill, though all households or all cultivators had access, but these households used to get free advances from the sugar mill on interest-free contracts. They also used to get promotional seats for free. So how tenancy was functional? So with this table, I tried to engage in two questions. One is how the tenancy was used as a labor control institution, and second, why the household in the 5 to 10 acres group could not access land or could not expand their size of operation. This table presents a mapping of tenants and the leisure households in the village. There are two principal leisure house section of the village. One is those are not in village but hold land, absentee landlords. Other is surplus appropriating households. Out of 235 acres total land under tenancy, we see these two groups own almost around 60 to 65% of land. But this set of households, the surplus appropriating section and the absentee landlords, have very clear-cut preferences when they enter in tenancy market. The surplus appropriating household lease out their land primarily to landless or effectively landless, means 0 to 1 acre group. When we look into share tenancy, all their land in share tenancy were given to this group only. So they primarily lease out their land.
I don't want to interrupt because this is very exciting, but you've just got a few minutes left.
I need just less than 2-3 minutes. It's the second last slides. So yeah, coming to it. So this household have primarily leased out to laboring households, and to seek their labor or hold right to first call on their labor. Through that, they get advantage in terms of labor or exploit their labor more than any other cultivator groups. On the other hand, the absentee landlords, they are not in village, but there exists some sort of class solidarity. They've leased out all their land to the surplus appropriating household. And when these absentee landlords have leased out their land, the contracts are long-term. They are made in the terms of cash, and the rents were almost less than half of the prevailing rental arrangements in the village. Moving to it, the last part, what is when they're appropriating surplus, what are they doing with the surpluses? Where they are putting in? So there are two features that I could identify in the accumulation strategy of these households. They're putting the places that can strengthen their hold in the production system or village society, or ensure rent to them or rental earnings to them. In farm sector, they already own more than 50% land, but in last 10 years, they have purchased total 70% of total land bought. They also invested more than 60% of total investment in borewell and tube wells, and they bought around 40% of tractors and pump sets. Here I like to emphasize village has a very active rental market for land, water, and machineries, and the rental rates were high. When they entered in non-farm sector for accumulation, they primarily invest in holding the political and economic positions in the village. They spend in political power backing, elections, etc., and making their caste clan groups being attached to them. When they enter in non-farm sector, they invest in shops nearby. They buy shops, give it on rent. They have designed and constructed shopping complexes and giving on rents. Many of the household own private tempo jets to and fro from the local markets and the block offices. All of them have rental income sources. Two of the biggest landlords, those have more than 100 acres, they are running akharas or wrestling cow. We know in their backward agrarian setup what are the role of akharas. That's creating forces of men with the muscular power to hold, exploit, and silence the people. Moving to it, I briefly conclude my presentation with two points. One, the impact of agrarian distress had differentiated impact on different sections of agrarian society that was reflected from the presentation. For one section of society, it has created a situation where living in near destitution condition. They are struggling day and night for their mere survival, for the 3 course of meal. On the other side, there are section that has all potential but could not getting it realized, and there is a section that is appropriating surplus, accumulating it, and enhancing its political and economic hold over the village. Means a sections that the surplus appropriating groups, their economic strategies is creating a backward agrarian system in the society that's holding back the economy. That is the observation that I got from the village study. Second is, as many scholars like Kumar and Bhagat 17 and 21 or Sahai 2020 is talking about Bihar may have a land inequality, but the land question has been overpassed or no longer significant. As Kumar said, most of the poor are looking for livelihood outside the village, not in the village economy. Their share of agriculture income in their total income for rural poor is discriminated. They no longer care about it, and for them, rural wealth or rural land no longer is source of power or wealth. However, this study have indicated that the skewed distribution of means of production and unresolved the land question continue to play an important role in agrarian backwardness and stagnation in Bihar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrityunjay. That was a masterly presentation, and it has opened up for our final seminar a lot of very basic aspects of the agrarian question. So congratulations on doing that, and also problematizing classification. But without more ado, may I turn to Dr. Nelson Mandela for his discussant's comments. Over to you.
Thank you, Professor Harris-White. Thanks, Mrityunjay, for taking us and discussing the various facets of Bihar's rural economy. And your presentation, in fact, of course, answers some of the questions you raised, but also throws up a lot more questions, like any interesting work would obviously do. So I'll have some comments and questions, and I will present it together. Right? One thing that unlike many studies on agrarian structure and so on, there is a very clear focus in your study on landless workers and the surplus appropriating households, who are also seem to be very big, right? Their average size is 26 plus acres, and some some of those households have more than 100 acres. Is there any specific reason in the context of Bihar that you choose to focus on these two classes, leaving out the other peasantry? Of course, you have presented some of their inabilities to accumulate and so on. But is there any other reason for this kind of a sharp focus in the context of Bihar? Because what is happening to that peasantry is also in some sense, are they getting, are they being added to the landlessness side? Is there a differentiation going on? Some of those questions will not come up if we don't focus on them. So that is one question. And another is regarding the economic structure that you choose to use in understanding the internal class dynamism of Bihar. And I'm sure you're more than aware that there are many class frameworks that are available to look at the agrarian structure in the village, right? I mean, the FAS has been doing a phenomenal work using class analysis as a lens to look at it. Or there is labor criterion from Utsa Patnaik or Professor Venkatesh Atreya surplus criterion, various other ways of class structures that are available to look at this internal dynamism. In that sense, why did you, the economic structure slide just, classifies rural scene as farm and non-farm, and then within that we have landless and cultivators. Landless laborers are pure tenants and otherwise, and then there is cultivators. And also we have non-farm sector and surplus appropriating households. So I want to sort of know why this sort of a structure that you chose. Does it help better in your, do you think it helps better in understanding the rural scene than using some of the frameworks that I mentioned, and in what ways? That is something I'm interested in. And also little more questions on the class structure in the sense, in the non-farm economy, what are the households that are part of? If landless labor is completely involved in the non-farm economy, are they coming under the non-farm sector or are they part of farm sector? So the class structure, the structure, if you can clarify a little bit, that will be a little more useful. And second, while discussing the labor strategies of livelihood, there is tenancy, there is migration, and there are people who simply do manual work, right? So migration, as you pointed out, is a very important strategy in sustaining livelihood for workers in Bihar. But when that becomes a lot more important in an economy where there is a lot more out migration, there are also possibilities of emergence of some new classes or old classes becoming a lot more prominent. For example, the tekedars, right, labor contractors. If migration is an important strategy, then it is very much likely that there are this new class of labor contractors who are going to, either appropriate the surplus or, get a share of surplus that are produced by these workers in the migrant sites, right? They're going to facilitate capital accumulation in the urban centers by pulling in this labor from the rural areas. So, if it will be nice if you have some insights on this. Is there a class of tikadars in the villages that you studied? What are who are they? Are they come from traditional dominant landlord classes or other intermediary peasantries who are becoming these new class of labor contractors? What is their nature? Because if migration is very important, talking about internal class dynamism without much discussion on this labor contractors, I think will hide certain important aspects of rural economy. So I thought I'll flag that. And second, when migration is happening, what is the nature of this migration? Of course, you mentioned seasonal and so on and so forth. But is it predominantly male migration? In that sense, if it is predominantly male migration, are there also certain kind of feminization of agriculture in the village? Is the tenancy and all that you're talking about, are these in practice being cultivated more and more by women workers? Is there anything that you can add on to it? It may not necessarily be the focus of your work, I understand that, but it'll be interesting to also know if these aspects are also observable in the villages that you studied or in rural Bihar in general. And second, migration also throws this question of the impact of social welfare schemes. That is also, I'm asking this also because the social welfare schemes are usually biased towards settled people, if I can put it so, right? I mean, in the sense, if you migrate out of village with your family, especially, who are going to get that PDS? You cannot get that PDS in your destination sites and various access to these social schemes. You have to be a resident of the village at least most part of the year to get benefits out of these social welfare schemes. Are there any government social welfare schemes present in the villages that you studied? And if it is who are accessing these? How these migrant workers are able to access these schemes, right? I mean, in some sense. And second, you also mentioned that the migrant workers are having more indebtedness than others, right? So you also put it like households with more debt are migrating. I would like to ask is the strategy of migration itself comes with debt. That is, people borrow money from the labor contractors, give it to the family in the village, and therefore they migrate, right? So it could be the other way around. It is not that more debt people are migrating, but migration comes with indebtedness, right? The labor contractor also wants to keep a hold of the workers, so it operates in that sense. That's why I was insisting more on the tikadars.
It's
Okay. For want of time, I'll probably end this. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
okay. Thank you very much, Nelson. That was a very wide-ranging set of comments. Now, Mrityunjay, would you like to react to some of those briefly? There are no questions in the chat that I can see, so you have a little bit of time. But the more that do arise. Madhura wants to ask a question, but first let's ask Mrityunjay to respond to Nelson's comments.
So Professor Barbara, do I have around 5-10 minutes to respond?
No, you
How much
don't
time
have
do we have?
5-10 minutes. You have 2-3 minutes to respond. So maybe just selectively.
I'll take a few of the questions and try to respond. The set of questions are about the classification and the question of not much emphasis on middle peasantry. So of course, the Marxian framework is much better suited to understand the socioeconomic classes and their positioning in the Indian countryside. That's used by the scholar that Nelson has mentioned. I was part of the so using a similar framework. I was part of the work that is classified and in the RS 12 volume 12 issue 1. One of the paper is dealing with it. But in this work, my primary focus was analyzing two set of household and seeing the contrast. One who enter in the village economy with nothing but their labor power, and other who have all the capital. They uses all their capital positioning and do not use any of their labor, and see how these two contrasting groups comes and how what is their positioning. So for this particular study, I use this framework. I do not recommend it as a universal framework per se. The condition of landless laborers and the household with a 0 to 1 acre or 1 to 2 acre are almost similar in this context. So that's why I didn't emphasize much on that. Coming to question of middle peasantry, that I consider the household whom I called cultivator with 5 to 10 acres of operation. There were just 18 or 19 households. So I'm analyzing around 308 households in that. I have just emphasized on that household, not on the 0 to 1 or 1 to 2, because their condition, their livelihoods, positioning, all are quite similar with the landless labor households. Migration question coming to the non-farm rural labor. So in the Indian countryside, it's really difficult to separate a household which is farm laborer, non-farm laborer. So in here also, I have not separated them. That's why I use the category manual labor, which include farm labor, non-farm labor. Household who are in artisanal activities or self-employed, they were considered as non-farm. But household who are primarily in the non-farm labor activities, they were part of landless manual labor class. From this village, the condition of migration, if I talk about migration was predominantly male. It was seasonal, highly mobile. They visit multiple cities in a single year even. They go, they work there, come back to village, engage in agriculture or non-agriculture work. Whenever there's something is there, they get something, they move out. It's kind of oscillation between the migration destinations, which are often different, and the village. So it's not like a set of household are migrating out and getting settled outside. It is like they keep moving, and the most dominant migratory channel was agriculture labor migration to Punjab, a village called Teng in Jalandhar district. That was also studied by FAS. In that, so what are the condition of migration? So I'll often take this case and I'll put again. In the migration, the most dominant migratory channel is the channel which is most successful one. So most of people try to follow the channel which is most successful. And in the most successful channel, the people who had first more advantage ideally should be the best suited or best advantageous people. When the foundation has surveyed this village, they met the first house person who went to the Ting village for the migration. They get this opportunity to interview that person. That person household condition was very impoverished, didn't have a latrine facility, didn't have a drinking water facility in homestead land. Their son was also moving and migrating for the similar trend. Their housing condition again hut with mud and thatch. Their children are also going for the similar migratory channels. It means a household that's engaging in a particular migratory channel over the 40-50 years couldn't make any meaningful change to their life. Village in general didn't have a well-established contractors because this migration channel, particularly the agriculture labor one, has been established, and labor among themselves mobilize and go. Whichever train comes in the harvesting and sowing season in the Punjab, they go. They have numbers of the large cultivators there. They call them, any of them, and in a group they go. These households do not move village and go out, so it didn't affect their social welfare schemes, if there exist any. One that was somehow was functional in village, that was PDS. This household had access to PDS. MGNRAG condition was in general non-existent in the village, and there was no state government poverty alleviation scheme in a functional sense in the village. Coming to question of migration indebtedness, yes, there exists. There is possibility that these people
I have
are
a
taking.
question on debt, so maybe we can answer the debt.
Yes, the last question was about debt. Madhura, would you ask your question?
Yeah, can I add to that? Yeah.
Respond to both.
Thank you. And Mrityunjay, that was a really excellent seminar, and you covered so much. And probably you didn't have the time, because I think the debt question is needs to be explored a little more, or you have to tell us a little more about it, because I think there are two things. One is, the actual level of indebtedness. Maybe some of them are so poor that they are not, nobody's lending to them. Or, as Nelson said, some of them have got indebted for the migrant worker, because he's a migrant and can send back money, may actually be someone that the moneylender is happy to lend to, rather than someone who's just staying in the village and has limited sources of income. So I think this is something. You did not tell us whether these 4 types of manual laborers, those only engaged in labor, those migrating, and those tenancy, whether there is an income hierarchy or whether it varies. Something may vary from person to person or year to year. And I think the entire structure of the credit market needs to be looked at a little bit, because even for your surplus appropriating households, they seem to be paying a very high rate of interest, and large part of their loans, even if the formal, are probably these new MFIs and so on, microfinance institutions, and not cooperatives and banks. So when you said 30% weighted average for them and 60%, that's not such a difference. In Tamil Nadu, it's less than 10% or even 0 if you take a crop loan from the bank. So I think if you could tell us a little bit more about sort of patterns of indebtedness and the credit labor and the linkages. Thank you.
Thanks, Madhura. Yes, I noticed that at one and the same time, there are relatively low levels of debt, but you also talk about a debt trap in your presentation. So I have the same question. Over to you.
Should I respond to the question on debt?
Yes, please.
So there are several questions regarding the functioning of the credit market and the debt and the migration. I start with maybe my presentation might have created some confusion because this 30% rate of interest in informal market is for the cultivator in the highest operation holding size group, not for the surplus appropriating group. For them, I didn't present the interest rate. I just presented this information that more than 30% of their debts are interest free. Means when they seek loan from each other, they take it for free. And those interest free loans are even of the 50,000 amounts. They are the one who had highest access to formal credits, and informal credits, most of the loan was Kisan credit card, where if you pay in the same year or in a year, it is 3%, otherwise 7%. The question of migration and debt and or circularity of migration and debt, is debt causing migration or migration causing debt? I'll try to explain it through the institution of indebted household are forced to stay in village rather than migrating. I think that understanding that labor control behavior, we can feel that, or we can try to understand that why landlord would prefer, or why that institution might have been evolved in the village. Whenever, means there may be possibility that the household with higher debts were moving out. So with the time, this landlords or the surplus appropriating groups might have created this institution. I cannot talk with the surety because single point data. I can just speculate on this, that if you're taking loan from me, you have to stay back in the village. By understanding this institution, and that was prevalent at a very high level, that was the most dominant form of attached labor or direct or indirect form, whichever form it functional in the village. Understanding that institution, that if you're taking loan, you have to stay in the village, we can see that possibility of higher debt means people are moving out.
Thank you. So we have 4 questions from the chat. Salbeswara asks, could you tell us more about interlocked contracts? I know that you've studied them from our previous interaction, but you said relatively little about them in the presentation. Could you expand on the role of interlocked or intertwined market contracts and class differentiation? Did you hear my question? You don't have to read it in the chat. I'm telling it to you.
Yeah, I got it. Yeah, village has a that I presented. Village have interlocking of labor and credit, interlocking of land and labor. In the land and labor interlocking was also existing in a general form that was mainly prevalent among landlords or surplus appropriating households and the Dalit household. Most of these Dalit households didn't have land, homestead land. They were living in the land provided by these landlords. One of the landlord even had 8 attached laborers through land. So they will be provided 0.75 acre of land. In return of that, the laborer and its entire family is bonded to do all kind of work that the landlord or the surplus appropriating household seek from them, where begar was very common form.
Thank you.
And I just for the interlinkage, yeah.
Thank you. And a bit related to that is Deepak's 2 questions, and then I'll come back to the others. Deepak has a question about the relationship between the ownership of machinery and rates of return and profitability and incomes from agriculture. And he thinks that the data shows that they are an important source of higher returns. And he also asks about state subsidies, other kinds of political interlinkages, if you like, where the benefit may go to larger farmers and increase their economic advantage over the mass of the poorer farmers in that village. What do you say to those comments?
Coming to the, I'll start with the second part of the second question. The state support is not like Kerala, where the There's no bonuses or for any strata of cultivators. The only state support that is should be assured to everybody, that's price security. In Bihar, it functions through PEGs. So PEGs is a primarily credit societies, credit cooperative society, but in Bihar they have a mandate to purchase output, particularly the paddy and the wheat. In 2005-6, Bihar has dismantled APMC, and after that, Bihar government has implemented this system called the credit society will buy the grain and later they will sell it, and the state will be there, and this money will be given to the cultivators. But the payment in the PECs are delayed, and second, PECs do not accept grain from everyone, citing various reasons, including the stock. If the stocks are full, whichever limited stocks they have, then they won't buy further because they don't have states system for that. They're basically credit societies.
Okay, this relates. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, there was no other state support. There was no subsidy for buying machinery or in any other sense.
So your response actually relates to Suraj's question below, which is also about the credit co-op, saying it's a government program. Does it not have a positive influence on the poorer strata in society? And if it doesn't, then why is there no claim or politics of claim or resistance?
In the case of village, from last 10 years, president, like in the credit society, everyone can take membership. So a lot of people take membership. Among the members, when president is elected, the president usually take the calls for the functioning of society. In last 10 years preceding the survey, the president of credit society was coming from the single household that is part of the village surplus appropriating group. So as I said earlier, this household, one way of holding the village economy and village society was capturing all possible political and economic institutions. So since these households are only holding the village president, village sarpanch, village PECs, they're not letting others to enter in. So because many of them are also in getting supported by the private merchants. So I have not reached into that because my study is not going that need further exploration. But these are the possible reasons why these cultivators in general do not engage in PECs. There are two reasons. One, delayed payment. Second, even they're ready to wait, they don't have access.
That takes me back to the 1970s. Thank you for that answer. Now, the question on feminization has come from Rojalini Sahu. When it comes to feminization, which you're alluding to, did you find any gender differences in the adoption of technology? And how do women navigate their way through it? And could I add to that, if machines, the mechanized aspects of production are increasingly leased in, how do women negotiate with the owners of machines? Do they negotiate on worse terms or on the same terms as men do? Over to you.
I can respond to this question in very limited ways because this is not this aspect of it I couldn't explore much. With the men are migrating, female do have a role in organizing production, and village have a very active machine rental arrangement. Yeah, and the prices are in general very fixed. There are limited people who are owning machinery, and those who are owning machinery, they're primarily engaging in it. So prices are in general getting fixed for the rental arrangement of machinery.
Okay.
So often the model rate and the mean or median rate was not very different. Coming to the question of feminization, so when in general, male have not given up their position of decision maker despite engaging in migration. Even when there are cases where the head of the household is migrating. So this household has become a binodal household where one set of household being outside still control the other node of the household. So male continue to be the dominating force. Female, when the male member is not there, they get the task of organizing, but their role in decision making, what to grow, what to cultivate, or from whom to take land is still limited. I need further exploration, and it's a very interesting area to explore. But for the immediate, this is my response.
Thanks very much. Utkarsh, do we have 2 or 3 more minutes?
Yes, please. Yes, please, Professor. You can.
Okay. I don't think there are any more questions in the chat. Does anybody else want to ask more questions? Because I can't see everybody's screen. I can see VKR and Madhura.
Yeah, we want to
And
hear
that's
you.
all.
We want to hear you.
You want to hear me?
Professor Judith Hire is asking a question.
All right. Like, could I just very, very briefly make a few kinds of comment? They're not really questions. The presentation starts with Bihar, and the meat of the presentation is a single village. And so there is a question about how the theories of either the lack of agrarian development of Bihar, which is one set of theories, or theories of distress, which is how you chose to frame a number of theories, how you test them in a single village. So the question is very simple, is what gives you the right to extrapolate from the village to the theories of Bihar? And you didn't do that at the end, but I guess if this is part of your thesis, you will need to show that you can say something about those various theories. And I noted down 5 different bodies of theory that you chose. The second comment I want to make is a very speculative comment, but I, unlike some of the other listeners, I thought you'd made a very heroic attempt to classify the complex rural society of this, what turns out to be highly unequal village. You've classified labor. You've also, despite not spending a lot of time on it, you've classified the, as it were, middle cultivators, and you've also tried to classify the accumulators. And all I want to say is that this whole problem, as the rural economy complexifies and as the non-farm economy, which isn't very important in your case, becomes more and more important in other villages. So the problem of classifying rural society in a way which makes analytical sense and then political sense gets increasingly difficult. And the reason that I'm saying all this is this whole business of unviable land holdings and the perpetuation and persistence and the multiplication and replication of unviable land holdings. So it's clearly the household which is the viable unit rather than the land. The land is part of complex labor and activity portfolios. And I just wanted to add my threepenny bit, because talking to small landholders in 2016 in Tamil Nadu, I asked about self-employment and they said, no self-employment. And then we talked for about 2 hours about what went on in the village. And I listed 31 different kinds of what Theodor Schenin calls pluriactivity, some of which was nighttime, seasonal, part-time. It doesn't show up in these broad brush classifications. On the other hand, like animals, which don't show up, and water and common property, which doesn't show up, they're actually quite important, I think, in figuring out how these households, which formerly look unviable or extremely poor, manage to tick over, reproduce, and multiply. So I will stop there. And if you want to respond, please do. But otherwise, we might say that's my blast at the end. Would you like to respond?
Judith wanted to say something.
Oh, Judith, I haven't noticed. So, I'm so sorry. Judith, do you have a question?
Yes, I was just going to say that, I mean, I agree, Barbara, with the point that I think that this was a heroic attempt to have a class analysis which took fully into account both the migration point and the non-agricultural point. And, you know, I think we need to go on working on how to expand or how to get better class structures, get better class classifications to cope with both of these aspects of the rural economies that are evolving. But the other couple of points I wanted to make, one was were there any livestock in this story at all? Because the landless group and the manual labourer group and the people usually do have livestock activities, which are in many cases quite important. And then finally, the fact that the women you dismiss, saying that the households with migrants, the migrants are still controlling what's going on. The women still have to manage labour. So it may be that they don't make decisions about crops. It may be that they don't make decisions about investment. It may be all sorts of things they don't get involved in. But the women that are left behind in the village to manage the land have to control labour. And I think that's a really difficult and really important part of this migration story. I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Do we have time for a final response from Mrityunjay? Good. Okay, over to you.
But another couple of minutes. That should be.
Okay.
So briefly, I like to respond to some of it, and rest of the comments are very useful for me for my future studies. As I noted down, I will respond only to two things. First, here I'm not. Bihar is a very diverse space with a different agroclimatic zone. Different regions have different history. There's southern and South Bihar that has very militant agriculture labor movements. Their labor relations, their migration pattern are different. Their socioeconomic classes are different. Then we have a Purvanchal region that has very different story altogether. I'm not trying to study one village of Bihar and going to respond the rest of it. There are studies that's claiming to the macro studies of Bihar, and in the name of as a macro stories, they were making the conflicts or the class relations insignificant or hideout. I'm just bring out those studies and those studies are not coming from the individual scholars, but by the very established institutions, and coming from over the last 20 years in very aggressive manner. And that's why I pointed out those established institutions are trying to say that Bihar agriculture backwardness is no longer is dependent on its backward agrarian structure or the class relations, but there exist other factors, physical infrastructure, human capital condition. I agree, all those exist, but through using one village study, I just try to show that this is also one of the reason and a very prominent one and had a historic root to it. This is something that's historically pushing Bihar back, and despite having all sort of natural advantages that an agrarian economy can have. So I'm not responding to those studies. I'm just saying there exists internal class dynamism to this distress, and that need to be catered in any study on Bihar. On the question of animal husbandry have an important role in households, particularly for the household consumption. But due to lack of a institutional channel or any dairy system in village, if any household is engaging in animal like milk selling or any other related businesses, they have to totally dependent on themselves. That's very risky sort. So that's why a commercialization of animal husbandry businesses, whether it's for meat or for the milk, is not getting placed in village. If you see the culturally or socially, this village have huge potential to have an animal husbandry business, because this villages have a large chunk of Yadav population in Bihar. They are the one who historically have this caste activities of selling milk, but with the lack of the market, that's non-existent in the current scene.
Thank you very much, Mrityunjay. I think we could go on all evening because your presentation has been very rich indeed and will give us lots of room for thought and maybe interaction with you in the future. Anyway, congratulations. And thank you very much to Nelson. And I would like to return everyone now to Sandeepan and the Foundation for Agrarian Studies to wind this series up. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor Barbara. I shall only take a couple of minutes to propose a vote of thanks. Thank you, Mrityunjay, for this informative presentation. I hope the discussion was as enriching for you as it was for us. I thank today's discussant, Dr. Mandela S, for his presentation, for his participation and valuable comments. We are extremely grateful to Professor Barbara Harris-White for chairing this session and her support in expanding the scope of this series, which is ending today. I thank Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung South Asia for a generous support in making this series possible. I'm also thankful to the online team at FAS, Sandeepan, Tapas, Setu, for their role in conducting this seminar very smoothly. Last but not the least, we are grateful to all the attendees for participating in making this a lively discussion. As has already been mentioned, we have come to the end of this second edition of the Young Scholars Seminar Series. We'll take a couple of months' time to reflect on the experiences and learning from this edition and plan for the next one. This second edition of the seminar series covered a variety of topics related to agrarian studies and socioeconomic life in rural India and rural South Asia, presented by young scholars from Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and India. Recordings of all these seminars are available on YouTube. Do take a look at them. Session 2 will be made available on YouTube in the near future. We invite any comments or suggestions that can help us improve or incorporate in the next edition. You can email your feedback to events@fas.org.in, events@fas.org.in, or reach out to us personally. To know more about the foundation and the work we do, please visit our website, fas.org.in. We are also on social media. You can find us at FAS Agri Studies on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Also, we are on YouTube with the same handle. I request that you follow us on these platforms to not just get updates about this seminar series, but also about our work. We'll be ending this session with this one and this edition of the seminar series. Once again, thank you all of you very much for your continuous participation throughout the series. Thank you all.
Thank you, Utkarsh.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank
We'll
you for
close it now.
opportunity. And
Thank you,
thanks,
Professor Barbara. Thank you.
Professor Barbara and Nelson.
Thanks, Barbara, Mrityunjay, Nelson.
It was a very good session. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.